Don't kick that out, please, for the love of God.
Hello, welcome back to Manic Minds. Here for another episode. Quite a big episode today, actually.
Yeah, probably 2 parts, I reckon.
If that. We'll see how it goes, but yes. No, we wanted to talk about men's mental health today, specifically.
Yeah.
And I suppose the inevitable kind of first question is, well, why do we feel the need to do a particular episode on men?
Yeah.
Because that can have many different kind of implications in itself. But and I suppose I would say that we're doing an episode on men's mental health in the same way that we do an episode on all of the episodes that we do. You know, there's things to say on the topic, there's things to discuss, but I suppose the unspoken question in all that is like, why particularly men? Why is it, does it mean that everything we've spoken about so far doesn't apply to men? Obviously not. But there is still a need to kind of do something that focuses more on men. And another reason is, well, just look at the statistics.
Yeah.
Things that people don't necessarily want to talk about, but male suicide rates
is through the roof.
Yeah. I think whilst everybody experiences loneliness at times in their life, I think it's more of a, in my opinion anyway, it's more of a societal issue that there are a lot of men in the sort of age bracket of, I'd say, sort of 25 and older, that are feeling very lonely and isolated in their lives and not quite sure why, whether they're with somebody or not, actually. So yeah, obviously, I don't know if there's any sort of introductory comments or remarks you wanted to make.
Probably more the fact that I'm very conscious with this topic to discuss men's mental health. I don't want to bring women's issues into this.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's we had a chat before we even started recording this about all this sort of stuff, but like, as we go on, there's going to be things that intertwine, and you can't dismiss one just to talk about the other, and that works on both sides of the spectrum. Like, it's the same as when you're talking about something to do with like women's issues. You can't just dismiss men completely, and vice versa, because hate to break it to everyone, but we live in a society where there is both.
Yeah.
So it's like, especially when you talk about societal impact upon things, there is going to be things that, like, you might bring up today that I go, bluntly, that topic needs the added bit of that, like, this is how that affects women, and that but not in a, I think I'm more conscious of at any point that I'm saying, like, from a woman's perspective, I'm not dismissing, I'm saying like that this is a bit fleshy out kind of thing. More of like has that been taken into consideration, rather than like no, I'm dismissing what you're saying, no, not at all. But I think there'll be times that when we're talking about women's issues, that's going to be a very similar thing.
Absolutely. I think that's a good kind of wider point, is that, I think for better or worse, we are, is there something that defines like this society and how it is at the minute compared to sort of previous times. We are much more willing to talk about the fact that gender stereotypes aren't particularly helpful.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't ignore the fact that they still exist. And for people, they still matter a lot. It's easy to kind of have this sort of conversation in this environment where we can talk about, oh, maybe we should do away with gender stereotypes. But the lived day-to-day experience of men and women are still very much defined by them. And we're not, we're certainly not here saying that we should or shouldn't do away with gender stereotypes. We're just acknowledging the fact that they exist and kind of talking about how they affect both men and women. And I'm sure like this episode will lead into different discussions that would incorporate more kind of women's views as well, or like, I think we spoke about, getting on to sort of topics around how the both genders can kind of help each other as well with mental health. But as a kind of introductory episode, I think maybe just focusing in on men.
I mean, I think definitely, obviously, what book I've just finished reading, the What About Men by Caitlin Moran.
Yeah.
And that is excellent book, highly recommend to both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a book written by a feminist. It's aimed at women, but it's about men's issues, and it's from our interviewing boatloads of men on different topics, and like I found it very insightful from a point of view of like, you know, bluntly, I have not lived my life as a man, so while I can go, yeah, I understand what you're saying, I don't comprehend it though because I haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
So that book, without a doubt, has, you know, opened up lines of inquiries for me personally to do with topics that I've actually, not necessarily just in this episode, but over time, I would like to get your thoughts on and things like that, because, you know, it's stuff that I hadn't really taken into consideration because, like we said earlier, I have not lived as a man, you have not lived as a woman, so we have very different experiences.
Yeah. And, you know, the point remains that whilst it's true that we wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't fully appreciate and understand what it's like to live as a woman because I haven't, doesn't mean that I'm not going to make the effort to try and understand and vice versa as well, you know. So, but I suppose, I mean, in a way, this links quite nicely to our last episode where we were talking about football being a particularly useful vehicle for men to start, you know, talking to each other. And I suppose that in itself kind of presents one of the main issues that I think I wanted to talk about was that, you know, the barriers to men talking about their feelings to each other. And again, very easy for people to sit here and say, well, you know, the problem is men don't talk to each other about their feelings and they need to. It's like, fine, great. Like how do we do that? How do we even get to that stage? I think just from like initial thoughts and without kind of dissecting it too much, but you know, I personally never feel like there's anything wrong with acknowledging that, you know, mental health is going to be dealt with differently with men and women. Like, and I think it kind of comes down to a lot of the stuff that you would expect to see when you even sort of Google mental health or like things you can do to help yourself. There's a certain feminine aspect to them. The types of things that they would suggest you do.
Yeah.
Even talking about your feelings. I mean, like if we take away everything else and we just start talking about your feelings, like, you know, men are very good at, you know, going for a drink together, and if there's like a pre-prepared topic like a football game, then we'll have no problem talking about it. It's just the way. But it's still dialogue, it's still interaction, it's still taking yourself out of your own head and chatting to somebody else. But if you say to somebody like who's been feeling really depressed, like, come to this group and we'll talk about how we've been feeling and be really open and honest with each other, that and I'm including myself in this as well, I still find that a little bit awkward. It's still like I would expect that group to consist mainly of women.
Yeah. No, sorry, what I was thinking there when you were talking was I am going to reference this book a lot, but it was very insightful, very worth my time.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, like, one thing that she points out in there is about how talking about your feelings is a very feminine thing. And the point she makes is if you've got a group of friends and like you go out, the girls find out what's going on in each other's lives, whereas like a guy will go out with his friends and they'll come home and your partner will go, oh, how so and so, what's going on with their dog? Like, is their dog all right? Like, what did you, like, how's their job going? Because either we're having this problem with so and so at work. Like, what's going on with that? And I know I'm generalising here, but men quite often go, didn't talk about that. And you're like, well, what did you talk about?
Yeah.
And they're like, football and you know, like beer and reminiscing and I think there's a lot of pressure there, stereotypically, from women to be like, you're talking about the wrong things though, because you don't know what's going on in each other's lives. And it's like, no, actually, if that's how, for you and your friends, it is comfortable for you to talk, you don't have to be talking about your feelings to be stopping yourself feeling lonely.
Yeah, it's funny that, I mean, I know that, you know, in past relationships and stuff, and where I've been out with a group of like my guy friends, and I've come back and, you know, a partner or whatever has said, like, what did you talk about? or like, how are they? Like, what's going on with them in their lives? And you're like, I don't know. I didn't ask. And it's like the look you get of like, well, what the hell did you talk about? And it's because like, it comes more naturally to certain people. And again, I don't think we should be worrying too much about generalizing here, because I think we're kind of talking about the generalizations in a way and acknowledging that they matter. So yeah, like stereotypically it would be more.
And I very much have been on the other side of that, where I've said to people in the past, like, oh, like, how's so and so's wedding planning going?
Yeah.
Or what they're doing for their stag do? Like, oh, da.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, it's the major event going on in their life. Why have you not been talking about it? And they're like, no, well, we're talking about this time when we were 15 and we did X, Y, and Z. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. But you didn't ask about the wedding planning.
Yeah.
Whereas with girls, generally speaking, within 5 minutes, you're like, how's the wedding planning going? Like, it's your go-to thing to say, like, hey, this big event going on in your life. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. Whereas I think for men though, it would be like, why didn't you, you didn't ask about the wedding planning and stuff. And like, if there was something we need to know, we'd just be like, oh yeah, I'll just text them and be like, they want to meet at 9. Yeah. You know, that doesn't warrant a whole conversation. That's not the reason why you go out for a drink with someone.
Yeah. Like, it is the very, like you said, gender stereotype of like, women tend to find it easier by nature to be like, hey, tell me all about your life.
Yeah.
Because I want to know everything. There's their own stereotypes that come with that we're not going to get into right now. But whereas I've got 98% of my friends are men.
Yeah.
Like, have been my whole life. And I can tell you honestly, with them, I have no clue what goes on in their lives because they don't tell us. Like, obviously, when I'll go like, what's been going on? They'll be like, not a lot.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. Whereas when someone goes to me, what's been going on? And I go, oh, not a lot. I've just been doing X, Y, and Z. Like, it's a longer sentence.
And it invites a response. Whereas saying like, it's all right, it's fine. Like, it's a good way of closing off that conversation, isn't it? And I do it as well.
I don't know many men who don't.
Yeah. See, I always thought of that as something, British culture of like when we're asked each other how we are, we don't really want to know. It's like a sort of polite kind of like, oh, how are you going?
You're right.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that conversation used to be. But yeah, reflect on it now. It's probably more of a male kind of approach.
I think that, like you said, British culture of you're right, you.
Yeah.
That is that's what's socially acceptable amongst people who you are not close with.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, as a stereotype from my experience, would be that women will go like, yeah, you, to people they don't know, but as soon as somebody they're close with goes, hey, are you okay? We'll go, no, I'm fucking not. This is everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas from watching my male friends who you can see in their eyes something's going on, and you'll go, hey, like, are you okay? And they'll go, yeah. And you're like, listen, like, just, I don't care if it's not me, but just talk to someone. And they're like, I'm fine. And they're not. You know they're not, because you've known them your whole life.
Yeah.
You can tell. But they're not. Even if you push, they're just going to put the barrier higher up. And I think there is a certain level of stereotype to that.
And there's a thing that, like, from my own experiences and my male friends, like, particularly sort of people I've known all my life, pretty much. Like, even with them, it's like we've always been. Well, I feel like we've always had this mutual understanding with each other of like, if we want to bring something up, we will.
Yeah.
And the fact that someone kind of says they're all right clearly when they're not, like we do recognise that, like we recognise that in each other, but it's like, what am I going to do about that? I can't push this. There's no point in like getting someone to talk about what they don't want to talk about. Whereas I think maybe with certain other people, it's more, they just need that push to let them know that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
Whereas I've always been of the kind of, they'll talk to me if they want to, which is dangerous in itself as well, because one thing about feeling very lonely and isolated and cut off is that often you don't feel like anyone really wants to hear.
Yeah.
Even if they're genuinely asking you, it's almost like, well, it's a burden putting on someone to like bring up what I'm actually like feeling. So, yeah.
Like, I've had multiple of my male friends over the years where I know they're not all right because I can tell by the look on their face or if we interact over text. Obviously, you know yourself, when you know someone, you know how to text.
Yeah.
And you can tell that they're not okay, but they don't want to talk. So you're like, right, okay, I need to find the balance between making sure that you know that I'm here, but not pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of the blue, one day you'll get a phone call. And I mean, all of my friends, if they ring me without texting first, that's like 911. Like, we don't do that to each other.
Yeah.
And you'll pick up the phone and they're in tears down the phone and they're blurting out what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing that I learned a long time ago was not to make this mistake. Why didn't you tell me sooner?
Mm-hmm.
Because that sentence causes so much more problems. It's not meant in a harmful way. It's meant in like hey, you could have come to me 6 months earlier. I would never have judged you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're so low that you finally hit a point that you're willing to say to someone, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
One of the first things you hear being, why didn't you tell me sooner? Just instantly puts the onus back on you.
Mm-hmm.
That like you fucked up, and then it amplifies in your head that it's not safe to talk to people.
Yeah. And again, from my own observations, I've found that with men that does happen a lot more, like the build up, and then when it comes out, it's more of a display of genuine like outward emotion. We're not particularly great at having those sort of maintenance conversations where we've kind of twigged that something's not right, but we haven't fully worked out what it is yet. So it's like, we're not going to have that conversation yet because I don't quite know what it is and what to talk about. And then, like you say, it'll build up and you'll suddenly get a phone call out the blue, like there's someone massively in tears. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I've had female friends that have done that before as well. But,
that's not a gender exclusive thing.
Yeah.
I think it's more common in men, but it's not gender exclusive by any stretch of imagination. I've done it myself.
Yeah.
I did it to you. I'd seen you the other day and I was perfectly fine. I rang you 20 minutes after I got home in tears.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, like it's not a gender exclusive thing. I think sometimes it's just, you don't know what to say in the moment.
Yeah. I think off the back of the fact that started this episode talking about the what we were talking about last week about football being a great sort of conversation topic, and I think that we shouldn't necessarily assume that talking about your actual feelings is the only way to improve your mental health. Like, it's very helpful if you can do that, but if it's a choice between that or don't say anything at all, then obviously that's a false dichotomy. Like, if you're feeling lonely and isolated and you can go out there and talk about football or whatever the hell it is. We're talking about football as one example, but there's, believe it or not, men have a wide array of interests that aren't just reduced down to sport. But whatever it is, if you can get talking about that topic, it automatically will reduce your feelings of loneliness and isolation, because there's that sense of connection, which is ultimately what we're craving when we're feeling lonely and isolated. And it's, however long that lasts for, it's still half an hour, 2-hour conversation where you've been out, you're interacting with someone, you're not in your own head. If that's all that you've done and achieved, then fantastic. Like, that is so much better than just bottling it all up because you feel like you have to bring up everything that you're going through.
Yes.
And again, if we are acknowledging that there is some sort of generalizations with the two genders, I think men could do with hearing that a lot more.
Yeah. I do think that is like a big thing though, that like, I think as society we preach, like, men talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
But do we ever look at what we're doing prior to that point to instill, don't, like, I'm just going to say, man up.
Yeah.
Like, just man up. I mean, obviously we do it to women in a different way of, put on your big girl pants.
Yeah.
But it is like, it's that stereotype of like, I have heard so many of my male friends say it over the years, I just need to man up. No, that's bullshit. Like, if something's bothering you, it's allowed to bother you.
Yeah.
Granted, like, you are in control of how you react, but like, you're allowed to have feelings about something.
Yeah.
Whether that be anything from, I'm pissed off that my team lost, right the way through I feel so isolated and alone that I have to stop myself chucking myself off the time.
Yeah.
And everything in between. Like, you're allowed to have feelings about things. And also a big thing, I think, as well. That so many, and I think so many women are really guilty of this. Well, why won't you talk to me? Like, I'm your partner, you can tell me anything. Sometimes your partner's not the person you need to talk to. Sometimes your best friend's not the person you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just, I mean, I'm a very big believer in as long as you're talking to somebody, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, but if the person you need to talk to is a co-worker who you're not even particularly close with, but they're best, you know, they're best equipped to handle what you're going through.
Yeah. Then
talk to them. It doesn't have to be the people who are deemed to be the closest in your life that you talk to about things. But I've seen me trauma dump on strangers on a night out, and I've seen strangers trauma dump on me on a night out in the smoking shelter because you've had a drink and it just all comes out.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Sometimes it's helpful when it is a completely neutral third person that you've never met before.
Exactly. It's why therapy's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously, I preach therapy constantly, especially considering, you know, you're bound by confidentiality.
Yeah, exactly. I've always wanted to just on the phrase "man up." Like, I've always feel like that could easily be reclaimed by mental health movement to be like, man up and talk to someone.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like like obviously we know that man up has that implication of like it's soft and it's not manly to talk about your feelings. Okay, fine, but is it that much better to keep them bottled up?
I think statistics would tell you it's definitely not.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we want to, you know, if you want to say man up to somebody, like, make sure you're using it in the proper sense of like, there's an issue here that you've identified. Really appreciate the fact that you've spoken to me about it. We both need to, you know, collectively man up and figure out what is the actual solution here. Because again, another stereotype is that men are more practical minded. Like, we look for how to fix problems. It's the age old thing of like, you know, someone's wife brings up like something and the wife gets annoyed because the man's just trying to fix the situation all the time. That's true. And like, when men talk to each other, there's an element of that as well. So there's nothing wrong, again, with just recognizing that there are certain differences, and it can be useful to recognize them as well. But in order to get to that point where you can find practical solutions to what's going on, you kind of have to man up a little bit and kind of delve into your feelings and figure out that things aren't right.
Yeah.
Don't have to tell everyone exactly everything you're feeling. Like, you're not going to improve the situation like 1,000% or whatever, but it's a start.
Kind of like developing that ability to take a step back from your own life and look at it as a whole rather than like through only your lenses. And I think that's a skill that you learn over time by working on yourself.
Charlie Chaplin said that life is a tragedy up close, but a comedy when zoomed out.
Yeah.
Love that quote so much.
Accurate.
Yeah. And that is, and we both know this, like the beauty of talking to someone. Because people, I'll talk to someone. I was like, well, what are the actual benefits of talking to someone? Well, initially, it helps you zoom out a little bit, because when you're in your head and mulling things over day to day, it feels like that's the only thing that's actually going on in the whole universe is what's happening in your head. It's not. And like, there are other things that if we were able to kind of draw our attention to, you'd realize that yes, it's still a shit situation, but put some perspective on it, and there are sort of solutions to it.
Yeah. That, like you said, that ability to zoom out, to clear your head and be able to think straight.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I do find quite funny because you say, like, when we say about like stereotypically men are more like logically minded, more fix-it minded, whereas women are more emotional.
Yeah.
You know yourself, I'm a very fix-it minded person, like very just logical, probably autism, but like, you know, that's just where I go. And I've had to learn in time to not do that to people because it's not what everyone's always looking for. Like, granted, sometimes people are like, please help me because I know that I can't see the wood for the trees right now. What do I need to do? Help me.
Yeah.
But there is times where people are coming to you, they're just wanting to vent. And obviously, you know, said it before, vent or advice. It's a staple. I love vent or advice, but I think that sometimes that can be a bit hard, especially from what I'm aware of about male friendship dynamics and stuff. just like in a female friend group, if someone starts ranting about something and you go, vent or advice, nobody's going to look at you weird.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I could imagine you being out for a pint with your mates and going, vent or advice, and them all going, what?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck did you just say?
Yeah.
Like,
why would I vent if there's no actual advice at the back of it?
Yeah.
That's probably what I'd go.
But sometimes you do just need to get it off your chest to allow yourself to think straight.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I suppose sort of there we get into the first potentially controversial thing that we might say in these series of episodes. But so I saw a viral tweet or meme, or I can't remember what it was. It might have been a TikTok video, I can't remember. And okay, like I know that you shouldn't form a whole like opinion based on viral tweets and memes, but they are actually quite good at giving you an insight into how people see things, like societal perceptions. And this basically said men don't get unconditional love in the same way that women and children do. Like the value of a man in society is very conditional. It's on what he can provide, essentially. Now, that I'm not saying that's true. It's a generalization. It's an opinion, but it would indicate that a lot of people do think that way. And then again, that helps me to understand a bit more about the problems that men have to opening up, because when you're opening up about your feelings, you're kind of admitting that you can't fully take on everything that you need to in life, like your attention's drawn elsewhere. So the fear, and I've felt it before, the fear for me is if I bring it up, especially to my partner, like they're gonna think, how deep is this going to go? Is he going to have to take time off work? How long is he going to be off work for? Can we afford to pay the bills? Like, is he going to be there emotionally for, I don't have children, but like, is he going to be there emotionally for his kids and stuff? Now, women might listen to that and think that's ridiculous. Like, I would never even think that if someone came to me with how they're feeling. But the fact of the matter is that is how quite a few men think, or that's what they think is going to happen as a result of that. And it's like, again, if your girlfriend is struggling and needs a couple of weeks off work, it's like, it's fine. Like the man's there, like they'll like carry things on, whatever. The man has to take 2 weeks off work. It's like, that's not good. That's going against what a man's supposed to be measured by. Now, I'm not advocating this as like the truth or anything. I'd be curious as to sort of how you see that from a female perspective.
That we think exactly the same thing when we're not well about ourselves, because if we stick with stereotypes, right? I'm gonna stick with the stereotype of, women do housework, man makes money.
Yeah.
Just for simplicity, essentially. Yeah. Obviously, most people's lives these days don't represent that, but just for simplicity, I'm gonna stick with that kind of mindset. From a female perspective, it's like, oh my God, I can't look after him because I can't look after myself. And it's my job to look after him. Like, he provides, but I provide for him from a home perspective, like, both of us have suffered with depression. So, like, we both know how hard is it when you're depressed to get up and go and like have a shower and get ready.
Yeah.
Like, from a female perspective, of in that dynamic where you've got a partner and you've got shit that needs to be done, and you both have responsibilities to each other as well as to yourselves. It's all of a sudden like, hang on, I can't make his lunch for work every day. I can't cook the tea on a night. I can't get the washing done and his clothes dry for work. He's going to think I'm useless. He's going to be wondering how long is this going to go on for? Because, if it's just a couple of days that I can't do it, he'll be fine. But by the time we get round to a couple of weeks, and then you haven't got my income, so now all of a sudden he's have to take on the extra responsibility of the extra bills, and it spirals.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that both sides don't actually know that the other side feels the same on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean,
the reason why we're doing these episodes.
Yeah, I think, like, I just to jump back a little bit when you said maintenance conversations earlier.
Yeah.
Our, like, as a generalization for women, our maintenance conversations are often taken as nagging, as like we're known, generally speaking, for being naggy. Like, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, da, 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 da. And I'm a big believer in, if your partner's nagging you about something, there's something underlying there, you've missed something, stop and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Especially if they're nagging you about things that they've never nagged you about before. Like, you know, if all of a sudden it's a massively contentious issue that you've not hung the tea towel up,
yeah,
I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's something probably different there. The same way that if it's never been a contentious issue, that, you know, you leave the work clothes to be washed till the weekend, because why would you wash them during the week? But all of a sudden your partner's going on about how he needs that shirt for 2 days that week when he's never done that before in the 6 years or whatever. There's probably something more going on there.
Yeah.
And years of passing ships, you've missed each other on something. So stop, have a conversation. And they can be hard to have, but it's a bite the bullet, because it's a hell of a lot easier to have that conversation now than when one of you is completely mentally checked out and you can't save it.
Yeah. And how, like, you know, how common is it for both sides of that to they're more inclined to talk with their friends about the fact that their partner's pissing them off than they are with their partner. I don't know what that's about. Like, you know,
the big thing for that with me, and I learned this a very long time ago, be careful who you vent to, because you've got no idea who's actually on your side and who isn't.
Yeah.
And just be careful who you say what to. There's certain things that you don't need to say to anybody else, like outside of your therapist. Because again, this is the perks of therapy, confidentiality. If you want to go in there and whinge about your partner for an hour, they can't then ring your partner and go, guess what they've just said about you. That's not how that works. Whereas, you know, your friends, you might be like, oh, my friends would never do that to me. But then, you know, 2 years down the line when you have had a falling out about something, oh, by the way, did you know she said X, Y, and Z? Like, I've seen that happen to me, and it's normally a twisted version of events, but like, let's not get into that.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, from the perspective of where we sit when, like, if this is going to come off the wrong way, because it's the only way that I can get across the level that I think that it is, though, to be this blunt about it. The fact that men as a whole think that their partner is going to be like, oh, you can't provide because you're going through an episode of mental illness, so therefore I'm going to leave you, is one of two things. It's either the stupidest thing your partner's ever going to have heard, because they love you more than anything. So why would the fact that you need some support matter? Like, okay, well, you know what? Your mental health's more important than the fact that we can go on holiday this year. We'll make it work. It's fine. Or if they're like, well, what do you mean you need to take 3 weeks off work for your mental health? I wanted to go to Turkey. You're with the wrong partner, dickhead. Run. Take that as your warning sign that they are not there for you. They're there because you serve them. Like, that's my personal 2 cents, and that goes both ways. No matter what way you swing, no matter what side of this, like, anything that you're on, when it comes to love, if they cannot support you when you need support, they don't fucking love you. Not in the way you are actually looking to be loved.
As much as I like fully agree with that, I suppose my response would be that, again, I'm using my own experience and examples here, but I think it's true of men as well, like other men. There's something about a man, like when a man and a woman break up, there's certain, I don't know what it is, societal, cultural, like, implications that are different. Like, if you're a man in your late 20s, early 30s that, like, gets broken up with or breaks up with somebody, that's where, like, the fear of the isolation and the loneliness are very real, and you're always kind of weighing it up in terms of, okay, so fine, my partner might not be perfect and might not be fully there for me, but the idea of being on my own is terrifying. And I'm sure women do feel that as well. But there's just something about, and we've said it at the start of the video, that there's statistically an issue with loneliness amongst men of a certain age. It's more of a thing.
Yeah.
And that may come from the fact that women are just better at rallying around each other when they're not doing well. Men not so much, and men feel like they have to take it on alone and not talk about it with each other. So I suppose that would be it's whilst what you said is completely true, I think it's easy again to say that, and I think it's yeah, okay, fine, my partner doesn't fully respect me and listen to my feelings, but she's my partner. It's better than being on my own.
Do you know what popped into my head there while you were talking? Daniel Sloss. You've got a very difficult question to ask yourself. 1, do I admit that the last 5 years of my life have been a waste?
Yeah.
2, do I waste the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And that was just what came into my head when you were talking, because I think that is the question that a lot of people will look at and they go, especially in like their late 20s, early 30s. If you've been with your partner all your 20s and you get into like your late 20s and you're like, oh, fuck. Like, I think I might have fucked up here. But what am I going to do? Am I going to start, especially if you've got kids and stuff, you're like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I've got children with them. How am I supposed to support them? Like, You've got all these other external societal factors that come into play. And I think it's true for both men and women that when you split with someone, there's different societal factors come into play there. But it is kind of like that moment of, do I stay with what I'm comfortable with even though I'm not happy? Or do I jump and risk loneliness, but also risk the best thing that's ever happened to me? And I think that's, especially when you take into the fact that for men specifically, it's a lot harder to talk about how you're feeling with each other. That's not something that you find easy to go out and go. You couldn't just go for a pint with your mates and go, right, I know I've been with my missus for the last 7 years, but like actually I don't particularly like her anymore. Like I've just, again, Daniel's Sloss patiently waiting for her to die.
I'm impressed in a way that, like, I don't know how many episodes we've done now, but it took you this long to bring up Daniel Sloss.
Oh, I know.
Yes, I know you're
yeah, I'm a very big
girl.
Daniel Sloss fan, and I didn't realise how much of a fan till I met him and I couldn't even speak. But he, honest to God, I do recommend Jigsaw though for a lot of people. Like, not even from a relationship standpoint, but just from a like evaluating what you want out of your life. Like, considering the man's a comedian, like, first of all, incredibly funny man. Second of all, he's so raw and honest about what it's like as a man.
Is the role of a comedian, though, really, when you think about it. It's like court jesters back in the day. Like, court jesters could give bad news to the king because of like who they were in society and stuff. And comedians are very much like that today. They can say things that people aren't supposed to say, but it's because they need to be said. But it's kind of acceptable to hear it from a comedian. So, and I've watched Jigsaw, and I think it's massively worth a watch.
100%.
Maybe not with your partner on a date night, but
maybe not, especially not if you've got doubts anyway. Like, maybe don't. If you're curious,
or if you're really toxic, dude, maybe it's a great idea.
But that I think that it's a lot easier, and I think that when you come back to society and you look at, if we stick with the rhetoric of like a man and his male friends and a woman and her female friends, it's a lot easier when a woman goes to her female friends and they go, do you know what? I don't really think I want to be with him anymore. He does like X, Y, and Z. Like, I just like women get behind their friend to be like, darling, there's plenty more fish in the sea. Like, you're still young, you're beautiful, get yourself out there. My experience from when I've watched men have these conversations, because don't get me wrong, when I've watched me friends have these conversations with our other friends, I kind of take a backseat because I'm like, I want to watch and see how this plays out, because male advice and female advice are two very different things. And they're like, I know, but like, really, are you gonna do any better? Like, come on, like.
I can vouch for that. That is.
And the blood answer is yes, you are going to do better, but not a point.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to bring up off the back of that was that I think, like, do you think that maybe, like, women are very good now at saying you don't need a man in your life to be happy, and that's fundamentally true. I massively agree with that.
Yeah.
I think men have a bit of catching up to do when it comes to you don't need a woman in your life to be happy.
Yeah.
That's still a bit of a weird thing to say. Even saying it now felt a bit weird.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know, like it's like, I don't know if you'd agree with that, or but I think that is another feature of societal and gender norms. It's like a man without a woman is after a certain age is a bit pathetic.
No,
Like the stereotype is it's a bit pathetic, a bit sad.
It becomes the stereotype of creepy old man, doesn't it?
Oh yeah,
like that's what it becomes.
Yeah,
like that kind of stereotype of like, oh,
Yeah.
they're a bit creepy.
So I remember having this conversation in like an English language class where we were talking about how we use language and the connotations of it. And I remember the teacher making a point of like an unmarried woman is a spinster, like an unmarried man is a bachelor. And it's like, what sounds better? Would you rather be a bachelor or a spinster? Like there's sort of like, you know, fundamentally like wrong with being an unmarried woman. And whilst unfortunately people still have those opinions, like as a society we're a lot better at challenging that, and it's like as a whole it's fine. Like if you realize that your happiness comes from being alone, nothing wrong with that. Like we accept that now as society. But again, like I said, I think men have more catching up to do to realize that actually you don't need a partner in your life, especially if you don't want one. Like don't feel like certainly don't feel obliged to. But again, it's like you might be in a really great stable relationship that's really happy, but then if that starts to fizzle out and it breaks up, like what are you going to do? And I just feel like men are a lot less prepared for that. And again, I think it is a bit of a barrier to being honest with how we're feeling, because it's like, what the fuck am I going to do?
I'm sorry, and I'm going to quote him again. This is probably going to come up quite a bit as well, but like what I'm thinking of now is, you know, the moment when he's like, you can get your happiness from 1,000 different people and not even in a slutty way.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, saying about how your happiness comes from wherever your happiness comes from. It doesn't have to be a partner, but we've romanticized the idea of romance and it's cancerous. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking about right now, that I think for a lot of men still, it's very like, I have to have a partner. I have to have a partner because without a partner, I am not complete. I'm not whole. Whereas I think over the last probably 30 years, especially, we've gotten better at being like, you know, that there's nothing wrong with being a woman who wants to be single, who wants to just be on her own. Like, you know, you can provide for you, so what does it matter?
Yeah.
Whereas we're still kind of are a bit like with men, like you said, once you pass a certain age, there's that kind of like unspoken, well, what's wrong with him?
Yeah.
Like if he's, you know, if he's in his whatever and he's not been in a long-term relationship ever before, then what like that's like red flaggy.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more red flaggy from a woman's perspective if they've never been in a long-term relationship. If you've been in a long-term relationship or you've been married and then divorced, you still kind of go, but what's like, why? Like, why did that break down? But like, especially the older you get, if you've not like from a woman's perspective, you do kind of get the. And I think, don't get me wrong, I'm very conscious to make sure that I never let this come across, but it doesn't stop it happening subconsciously where I go, red flag, what's wrong with you? Like, question, because like, you know, you seem lovely, but what is it that's come out later down the line that stopped any woman from staying with you? Because.
And again, that, you know, it comes back to how men generally are measured by society. It's like the fact that no woman's looked at you and saw you as a viable option for a partner means there's something inherently wrong with you, which is nonsense, really, when you think about it. Like, it might just be that that man has never considered being in a relationship or is never kind of interested, and then they've met you and they're like, quite like you. Like to, you know, there's various reasons why. So, yeah.
I think as well, like, there's one thing that popped in my head there is, you know, the stereotype of crazy. Have you ever noticed a crazy woman's hot, a crazy man you stay away from?
Yeah.
Like men, like how many times I've heard men say like, oh, the crazy ones are always the best.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's like something kind of slightly adorable about a girl who's a little bit bonkers. Whereas like if you've got a man who's a little bit like explosive temper-wise or whatever, and that's like, you know, we've been conditioned that those are the behaviours that you need to kind of go whoop and stay away from, like generally speaking.
Funny that, because if we're talking about things that you hear people say, and again gives a bit of an insight into how people think, but like to do, like normally with men it's like, oh, that's so attractive, he can put up a shelf. Oh, that's so attractive,
Yeah.
he's like, he's good with kids, like they're really practical, useful things. Whereas like finding someone attractive because they're a bit crazy, like that's not, that's not a long-term goal. Like, yeah, they might be great in bed, but like, what are you going to do after that? Like,
but I think that's what I mean more like about like when you hear people talk about like, especially because now I think we've got like in today's society, we've got a bit more of like freedom of like, you know, body count doesn't matter for a lot of people these days. Like, you know, a lot of people are like, you're allowed to just do what you want.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, as long as everybody in the situation's consenting and it's understood. But like you say, I think women naturally look for those practical qualities, but I think a lot of time don't even know they're looking for them, because it's not until a man does something like that and they go, "Oh, I found that quite attractive."
Yeah.
And you're like, why did I find that attractive? It's like, oh, because out of everyone I've ever dated, I would be the one who had put the shelf up.
Yeah.
And it's just another thing that I now can think, I don't have to do that myself. And I think that that's becoming more of a thing of like where women go, it's a nice to have because it's nice to not have to do things for myself. Like I can, but I don't have to.
Yeah.
Whereas I think my perspective of what men think when it comes to a partner, it's more of like I have to be able to show that I'm useful to keep around. Whereas for women, it's like I don't have to keep proving that you need to keep me around. Like there's no like societal pressure to say like, oh, you have to keep proving yourself to stay so that they stay interested in you.
You know what's coming into my head at the minute? You know, The Offspring. I can't remember what the song's called, but like get a job or whatever.
Yeah. Why don't you get a job?
Why don't you get a job? Like it's like I love how like they wrote it. There's like a verse where it's like a male guy with a sort of unemployed female, like unemployed girlfriend, and vice versa. But even like I remember as a kid listening to that song and thinking like the one where it's the woman saying the man's a deadbeat and doesn't do anything. That makes more sense. And I always thought like they threw in the other verse just to kind of as like balance, but it still feels weird to be like, if your girlfriend doesn't work, it's really not as big of a problem as if it was the other way around. If they're not as like practical and able to kind of practically help people.
Well, if you look at that even just from society's expectations, like if you know you go, if you say to a man, "Oh, what's your missus do?" and they go like, "Oh, stay-at-home mum," no one bats an eyelid. But if you go like, "Oh, what's your partner do?" "Oh, he's a stay-at-home dad," everyone goes, "He's a stay-at-home dad." But if that works for you, then why does it fucking matter? Like that's what it's supposed to be. Whatever works for you in your dynamic. I mean, there's sometimes where like it can be anything from financial to just how much people enjoy their jobs. Like if the woman really loves her job and the man's like, I can't stand my job, and you can do it that way, and that's better for everybody involved who actually matters in the situation, may I point out. Then do it that way. Who gives a fuck? But as a society, we are more inclined to go like, what do you mean your husband doesn't work? Compared to what do you mean your wife doesn't work?
And that, you know, that's a really good point, because it works like the other way around, where paternity leave is still something that
2 weeks.
It's not a given. It's something that we are still trying to struggle for, apparently. And it's again that comes from that old stereotype of the man being the practical provider and the woman being the caregiver. And it's the more you talk about these things, the more you realise there's definitely things that we need to kind of look at politically and socially as a way to change things.
I think the one thing that I noticed quite quick off the mark from we first started talking, there are things that women think that are exactly the same as what men think and vice versa. But because nobody talks about it, we're stuck on two sides. Like we're having the same problems, and we could be helping each other, but because nobody's actually willing to go like, hey, let's have like a candid conversation where we're not going like, well, you know, for instance, you know, men really struggle like to talk about their feelings. Yeah, well, you know, women struggle too.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, let's just actually listen to understand rather than listen to respond.
Mhm.
Like, because then you might kind of start to go like straight away. You heard this before. You said about the way that men feel if they talk about their feelings. Yeah, well, women feel like that too.
Mm.
So actually,
Mm.
that's another thing that we've got in common.
Yeah, that should be a reason for collaboration and talk rather than a division. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And that's how you get positive change through taking the time to go like, hang on, actually, let's focus on the things we've got in common first. Because if we all work together and fix these problems that we've got in common, then okay, when we start looking at things that, you know, we as a gender need the other gender's help to fix, you're more inclined to go, actually, okay, we're going to listen to you, and vice versa, because there are issues on both sides of the coin where men need women's help to fix this and women need men's help to fix this. So let's just work on the middle bits first and have a conversation where we actually realise that, hang on, we've got a lot in common here.
So as I said, I think that this is going to be the start of like an ongoing series of videos that is going to incorporate like women's mental health into it as well. But I think the kind of what the main point we want to kind of get across is that like there is much more that we can be doing together collaboratively to help each other than to automatically go for that division that we're so common, that we're so used to seeing today. Of like, if you talk about men's mental health, and it means care about women and vice versa, like that really needs to stop. And I think if there's anything I want to kind of get out of these next few videos, it's that.